Back in 2014, I had this crazy thought. What if the trucks stopped coming? I was thinking about grocery stores. What if the trucks that delivered the food just stopped coming one day? I don't know where the thought came from, but more or less as soon as I had that thought, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I started to take courses online to learn about food, where food came from, how do you grow it, and just recognized, and this is 12 years ago now, so socially, a lot of people have caught up in the sense of thinking about where their food comes from, getting backyard gardens, especially after COVID. The number of people who garden and grow their own food, bake bread and whatnot, and are interested in a homestead life has dramatically increased. But, a decade ago, that thought just came in my mind and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so what I did was I had already dropped everything pretty much and left my life in Canada for about a year. And I was in Thailand when I had this thought. And then when I came back to Canada, I interned on an organic farm in Hamilton, Ontario. And it was one of the most eye-opening experiences that I've ever had, and something that really, truly reshaped who I am as a person and the way that I see the world. I had never spent that much time outside ever in my life. I basically lived outside. I actually lived inside of a silo, which is exactly what it sounds like, a grain silo, an abandoned old grain silo that they had put a floor in, and I was able to live on the second floor of it, and I was the only person living there. It was pretty cool, to be honest, but it was basically like living outside. When it rained, it actually rained inside too. Well, I had to put a tarp up top because my bed would get wet when it rained. So that was just really eye-opening for me, and that's just the living accommodations. It was everything else to do with that experience just brought me to life, is what it felt like. I had never worked that hard with my hands and my body ever. The first week I was so sore. I was so physically in pain and tired, and I had never experienced anything like that in my life before. And then when I was done, it left such an imprint on me that I just couldn't stop thinking about farming and just wanting to grow food and take control of the food that was in front of us. And more than anything, though, it was just like reclaiming my joy and happiness. I had never felt so happy. And I was actually making like $200 a month. Granted, I didn't have the life expenses that I have now with kids and mortgage, rent, whatever, all these things and these obligations. I was free from them because I was living at no cost on this land, and the food that I was getting was coming from the land as well. That was part of the agreement was, you work and you stay for free and you eat for free. You'd have to cook your own meals, but sometimes we'd eat together as well. And then that in a nutshell was basically it. It made me recognize how simple life actually is in terms of the needs that we have. Food, clothing, shelter, and then community. That's it. That's all you really needed. And it's like those things were taken care of for me, but in such a high quality way. I was using my body in a way I had never really done before. I had wanted to go to school to be a doctor. I wanted to go to school for physiotherapy. So I knew about exercising and I work out in the gym context. But like I said, I had never been so physically sore in my entire life. And then I had to get up the next day at 7 a.m. and do it again and again and again. And it's like money as an object became removed from my psyche. And so, yeah, it was pretty much like my life needs were taken care of in exchange for my physical labor. And in that moment, I got a glimpse into what life would have been like, maybe even before money existed, before in these type of bartering economies, where what you physically were able to produce with your body, through your time, through your work, through your labor, I felt that in exchange for the provision of my food, the provision of my shelter, not my clothing, but community as well. I became good friends and still remain friends with the farmers and with some of the interns that I was interning with as well. Like we became such a close knit group. And that really took care of the social needs that I had. Of course, I've got family. I would visit them once in a while. I had a girlfriend at the time who's now my wife. I would visit her maybe a little bit too often, especially towards the end of the season. It started to become a bit of an issue because I started to show up late for work because I was just kind of driving back and forth towards the end of it as the weather started to get colder. But that aside, it was just, again, this glimpse into what life would have been like before money. What life would have been like before having to trade your time for money. I was trading my time for shelter. I was trading my time for food. I was trading my time for community. So it became different in terms of the way that I would view my time. And it was like the release from having to earn income gave me so much joy. And again, I recognize that it's a really isolated situation where, I didn't have the costs associated with having a family or having to pay rent or whatever. But again, that's not the point of this. The point of this is that seeing that glimpse into economies that are different than the ones that we know today, the economies that we work in today. And it started me down a path a little bit more recently around these family-based economies. And there's this guy named Rory Groves. He's written a book called Durable Trades. And I really like the book a lot, largely around the ideas that are behind it. The point that he really is getting at underneath is, what is wealth? Like, what is wealth actually in the grand scheme of things? Is it the material wealth? Is it the finances that you have? Or is it the connections that we have to one another as neighbors, one another within a family, within a community? What's actual wealth? And he uses a really cool example during the 1930s Great Depression, how people who lived in these family-based communities, these family-based economies, how they very likely didn't even know that a recession or a depression was happening. The people who lived in our more normative or normal economy that we know now, that's defined by, pension plans and the amount of you have in the stock market, they place their value in a different system. They place their value in the land. They place their value in the food. They place their value, instead of stocks, in their livestock. And that form of wealth during an economic downturn proved to be more valuable than the amount that you would have in the bank or in the stock market or the amount that you're able to earn at your job. And now that we're facing these rising prices, like inflation is just going up, especially where I'm at right now in Canada. I saw something in the news the other day about food prices are so high that they're looking at having government-owned, in the city of Toronto, government-owned supermarkets. And that would be, the purpose of that would be to subsidize the cost of food because it's so expensive. And hearing that brings me back to that earlier thought that I had around exchanging time, exchanging labor, exchanging skills that you may have for food, for shelter, for something that other than money. And are there communities out there that exist like that, that are like that? It'd be like a bartering type of economy, or at least you're paying each other. So the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the farmer, the person who's growing the livestock. All these people, and then you bring something to the table that you have to offer. And in exchange for that, you work together. Then in that type of economy, you're not fully reliant. And where I feel like I've matured in my thought is early on, especially when I got right off the farm, I was just wanting to be self-sufficient. And that's the other big term that you'll see flying around right now is self-sufficiency. I want to have my own farm. I want to have my own homestead. I want to do it all on my own. And what I've come to recognize is that I don't think people can really do it all on their own. There's so much to do. If you were to sustain your own life, there's so much to do. People can do it. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's isolating. It's isolating because there's so much to do. And if you're doing it all on your own, then you need to be a jack of all trades, but maybe a master of none. But if you mastered a single trade or single skill, and with certain skills, like if you wanted to be a shepherd, for example, you'd likely be a shepherd as well as a farmer, because you'd want to grow the pastures on your field. You'd want to make sure that you've got food for your livestock. So you're growing the grass or the pasture or the forage. Maybe you're also a carpenter because you need to build a barn or whatever. So you can have these multiple skills within a single area of expertise that you can bring to the table. But by mastering that one area, you then have something to offer to a community. And that's the difference between the self-sufficiency side of things and the community-based and family-based economies, is that you have something to give to others rather than solely focusing on yourself. And that's been one of my biggest points of maturing, I think, in the last decade. Is now the way that I view things is we build this house and establish our homestead here is, I don't know if we're going to be entirely self-sufficient. I don't know if you can be self-sufficient. And so I'm doing away with that idea altogether of self-sufficiency, but instead thinking about family-based economies. So what can our family contribute to our community at large? How can we connect with the dairy farm down the street? How can we connect with the baker that we know? How can we connect with the person that we know at church that grows grain? I'm not really that interested in growing grain, but I'm definitely interested in eating bread. So what can I give to them, or how can I help them or contribute to them in a way that I can have healthy bread for my kids, for my family, without me having to find a spot, grow the grain, mill the grain, make the sourdough, whatever, all the things that go into making bread. I'm not super interested in doing that. But if I could get flour that's milled, and then all that we have to do is just make the bread ourselves, or maybe we just buy it from a baker. I don't know, whatever. But the idea being economies that support each other. And the thing I really like about this is that it goes beyond the dollars and the cents. I actually begin to care about that person. I start to care about the person that grows the grain. I start to care about the person that bakes the bread, such that whatever I do and the choices that I make, I start to think about the people around me. Whereas with self-sufficiency, I'm really just thinking about myself only. I'm seeking to serve my own family, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it sort of skews your perspective or your vision on where you're positioned in society. And I feel like if we have a whole bunch of people who are just thinking about themselves, I don't know how far that advances you as an individual, but us as a community and as a society. So as we're building out this homestead, we've been blessed to have 18 acres of land here where, as you can see in the middle of building, but I'm trying to really think intentionally about what we're doing here. I'm back to where I've started this video out with, this thought out with, of that time of working with my hands in exchange for very little money, $200 a month, but feeling so satisfied and so fulfilled in life and feeling such a sense of joy. How can we go back to something like that? And are there people that have lived in those economies in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s? And is there something that they know, that they experience, that maybe we're missing? And so that's a big part of the reason that I actually built this table. I want to start to have conversations, intentional conversations with older generations, asking them questions about What was community life like when you were growing up? Were people trying to be self-sufficient, or did you keep your neighbor in mind? When you adopted new tools and new technology, did you purely think about efficiency and putting yourself first? Or did you think about how it would impact your neighbors, how it would impact your relationship with your family, how it would impact the finances of the baker that lives down the street from you? Is there a different way of thinking? Is there a different way of being that we have lost with more technology? And I'm not hating on the industrial revolution. Everything I'm doing now here is because of the industrial revolution. But just asking the question, if socially there's something that we can do that's different, is there a way that we need to change? Are there practices that we have lost? And are they meaningful? And what does it mean if we bring those back? And so as I have conversations at this table, I'm beginning to ask the question, is it time to rebuild something that we've lost?